Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming to the celebration of David's wonderful new book, Healing Heals, The Healer Too. For those of you who I don't know on the call, I'm Casey, and I have known David since I believe I was 22 and he was 24, something obscene like that. And I have been kind of an eyewitness to so many of the transformations that I feel like, David, you have sort of put forward so vividly in this compilation. And, when we first met, you were in the thick of trying to break into Hollywood. You were working on a short documentary called Carissa, and you thought it was kind of going to be your launch pad. And you went through years of struggle with that system, sort of giving it up ultimately. I remember vividly, like it was maybe 2013. We sat at dinner in downtown New York and sort of, you told me the details of taking ayahuasca for the first time. And this was sort of right before ayahuasca became, ubiquitous. And it was just seemed like black magic. And it was like, I'll never forget that conversation. And of course, that was the beginning of such a process for you. And we're going to get into all of that because this is all the material of this new work. So start by telling us, like, how did this book come to be? What was your thinking?
Thanks, Casey. And thank you.
I forgot to say that this today is the official publication day. It is available right now on Kindle. However, there's a slight delay on Amazon's end with the paper copy, but it should be available at any moment. And here is the Amazon homepage right now.
Awesome, Q. Well, Casey, or Schwartz as I call you, thank you for doing this with me. And you're the best, and I really appreciate it. And thank you for that thoughtful introduction. And you asked, how did this book come to be? Well, it's a two-part answer. The first is that at random spurts, I would find myself typing semi-furiously into my phone or into my computer into Facebook and posting thoughts, feelings, stories. I didn't really know what I was doing. I had no real intention in writing them. I wasn't trying, with a few exceptions, to persuade anybody of anything or to market myself, though there were some moments of that. But for the most part, I was just sharing what was alive for me in a medium that felt fun. And I never had, when I was writing these things, any thought or hope or even desire to do more with them than for them to live as they did as little posts. But then a friend of mine who is on this call and deserves some credit, Rachel Ratliff, kept pointing out that she really liked my writing. And you too, in ways. And I think Rachel collected some of my writing and sent it to me, or sent it to somebody else. And that seed was like, maybe there's more in this than I thought. And then also, Casey, you had connected me to a literary agent, and I had, per Rachel's thinking, collected some of my thoughts and sent them to her. And so they were alive somehow, these posts. And then I just woke up one morning and I thought, maybe this is a book. Or maybe another way of saying it is, the book woke up one morning and knocked on my head. Mm-hmm. But I still wouldn't have gone through with it. Anyone could have shot me down and I would have stopped. So I have a friend named Faye who couldn't make it today. And I just sent her the posts and I said, can you do me a huge favor and read these and tell me if this is a book? And Faye's a professional editor and a smart woman. And if she had said no, I would not have been hurt and I would not have done anything with it. And that would have been the end of that. But she said, this is really something. And she started picking the good ones apart from the bad and thoughtfully putting them together. And we got into a bit of a flow. And that flow resulted in this book. And it just kept wanting to happen. But even so, I had to send it to Rachel and then handed it to my housemate, Diane. And they were like, this is good. So finally it just kept going. Like the book kept going, and now it's here.
Well, what was interesting about reading it for me was that, of course, over the years, I've read the Facebook posts as you've posted them, but I actually felt like reading them all together was a completely different experience. And it was like it was, first of all, soothing. It was so incredibly soothing to just sort of be in the stream of your thinking. And I can't recommend this enough to everyone who's listening to this call, because it's so filled with perceptions, insights, things that we're so desperate for at this horrible, anxious moment, particularly. I love it. So let's dive into the particulars of it. Why don't you read one short entry of your choice, David?
Okay. I think this entry encapsulates one of the big themes of the book, and the title captures it really well. So this is the paperback, by the way, and it's separated into chapters. Each chapter is essentially a post, and then it looks like that. It's very lovingly and thoughtfully done. And I titled my posts just recently. So this post is called, "Why Do I Want to Be Better Than I Am? Why do I want to be better than I am?" I woke up. I told myself I should go to the gym. I told myself I should journal. Instead, I checked Facebook, watched Sweden beat Mexico, and felt guilty about it. An old pattern, to hold myself to some standard of productivity or even of self-care, to compare myself to another hypothetical David, one who wakes up, meditates, kills it at the gym, and super focuses on the tasks at hand. But why is this David better than the real one? Who decides these things? Who told me I was irresponsible and lazy? And why do I listen? It's okay to want to be more than you are, but whatever you're trying to be more of, it's worth asking where that standard came from. Maybe the more to aspire to is just more self-accepting and more self-loving.
That's so nice. And actually, I mean, this is such a reoccurring theme throughout the whole collection, is this idea of like this constant self-flagellation that we all perform, and this constant striving. And I would say, like, this is sort of one of the most prominent themes running through. Where are you with it now, with this line of thinking now, as we talk in September 2020?
More solid and clear about how dark and toxic and unhealthy our cultural standards of success and productivity are, even than I was when I wrote that. So as I was going through the years, healing and spiraling in and out of depression and healing some more, there was a voice in my head that was saying, well, maybe they're all right and I'm wrong. Maybe I do suck because I can't, for instance, hold down a regular job. Maybe something is wrong with me because I cannot focus 100% on making money. Maybe something is wrong with me that before I can really do anything productive, I need half an hour of meditating, an hour of doing nothing. Maybe something's off with me. And now I'm persuaded that nothing was off with me, and that basically we have all been in an abusive and toxic relationship with our culture that is constantly telling us that if we don't do what they say we're supposed to do, something is wrong with us. And this book is a gentle assertion to the contrary, that our value does not derive from how well we fit into toxic cultural norms. And I think as I now in where are we, September 2020, I have less patience, less space, and less capacity to cope with that kind of toxic thinking. even as I have more space and more compassion for people who are still under it.
You know, we were going to talk about the virus like later in this conversation.
I think you're muted somehow, Schwartz.
David, we were going to talk about the virus later in the conversation, but I think let's get into it now a little, because it seems like part of this revelation around productivity has come to you this year during the pandemic. Tell me about like what your pandemic arc has been in terms of what you were observing in March and thinking in March and what you've seen play out culturally.
Well, I think there's a good post about this. The first thing I noticed, or felt like sharing anyway, about the pandemic was about the level of fear I was experiencing around me. And the title of this, it's a very little post about this, and it's "The Dark Force Threatening to Destroy Us All." The fear around this virus is astounding. It seems to me that all the fears we cannot face, the fear that the natural world is dying, the fear that our civilization will collapse, the fear that our children and our children's children will live in an unrecognizable dystopia, these fears, unprocessed, unexpressed in the media, are driving the run on toilet paper and hand sanitizer. The machinery has given us something it's okay to be scared of, so all that fear rushes up and out suddenly. So I think I saw the pandemic really early on, somewhat presciently, as an opportunity for unprocessed work to happen. It was creating this space for a deeper evaluation of what's going on in people's psyches. It was doing that a little bit with me. And I was also thrilled from a political standpoint. I mean, so much of my activist energy has been doing some version, along with many other activists, screaming stop. And, you know, to the point of like, how do we grind the whole system to a stop? How do we actually stop everything is a question on the far left that I was deeply engaged in for years. And then it turns out we didn't have to do anything. A little virus could stop it all. And so that was joyful for me. And I could see the value of it, even just in the value of less cars on the road, less people going to work, less crap. Now I don't know. I mean, I feel like all that's true, but we're just at the beginning of the beginning. And so we've gone through this sort of first wave of reevaluation, but we haven't yet distilled culturally the truths that the virus has to offer. We're still deluding ourselves that we can fix what is wrong with another vaccine or another X, Y, or Z. We still aren't even approaching the deeper questions like, why did this virus emerge? And what does it have to teach us about each other and about ourselves? These questions are still borderline academic or pushed off into spiritual lands. And if you turn on the news, it's all delusional and practical at the same time.
And why was it that during this virus time you got to this sort of realization about toxic addiction to productivity? Because I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, right now, and I'm curious about everyone's experience on the call. Like, so many conversations I'm having with friends have to do with, you know, who am I? What is my life about? You know, where do I stand in the world? It's this sort of like this deep sort of anxious sadness around status and achievement. And this even applies to like incredibly successful friends of mine. And I've been fascinated by it. And I'm just wondering, why do you think it's kind of seeping out now?
First, I think I want to say I'm so happy it's seeping out now. And it's like, it's been so, this struggle for me was so intense. I want to decouple those two thoughts though, because there's the need to succeed, and then there's the need to be productive. And those two things get entwined in all of our psyches. I was struggling much more with the need to succeed than I was with the need to be productive. And a lot of people do, especially those of us who are cursed enough to feel really special when we're growing up. We feel like we have something really special to offer. And so therefore we have to embody that specialness in some external way that people validate. And that was my curse. And I think what this virus is showing, or this pause is showing, is how unsatisfying that grasping is.
Mm.
How unsatisfying that grasping is. And then the productivity piece has been a problem for me too, and a problem for almost everyone I know. Like, I have to get this done. I have to write the great American novel. I have to work really hard. I have to get all these emails answered. And I think the fact that everyone found themselves at home and in quiet allowed that voice to be revealed for the insanity that it was. So when we're all in a work environment, or we're all synced up at this hyper speed, all ashamed that we're not speedy enough, it is a big enabler of this delusion. But the virus took all of that away, and we were all forced to slow down. And when we were all forced to slow down, that speedy voice that says you're not doing enough just got really, really loud. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, we were all to some degree, and we are all to some degree, dealing with a kind of mortal fear. And mortal fear is not easily reconciled with sending email responses. Mm-hmm. So there's a deep thing going on inside us that we're ignoring while trying to deal with the shallow things. And it's just all too much for us not to see it. And well, my revelation, which is the last part of the book, is that the need to be productive is deeper in the American psyche, from my vantage point, limited though it is, than the need for money or the need for success. That we would give those up in a heartbeat before we would give up this idea that we need to do something with our time that matters. And how deep that goes. Question out of my beyond my pay grade.
Yeah, for now. But I mean, you know, one of the things that you talk about in 100 different ways in this is the sort of the great tool for letting go or moving beyond is basically like simple awareness. Now, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, awareness is good. Self-acceptance is better, and self-love is the best. And then somewhere between self-acceptance and self-love is needing and asking for love and help from others. This is the path. Awareness is the minimum requirement, but it is not sufficient. So if you are aware that you have a compulsive addiction to productivity, you have made the first major step toward healing it, but it is not yet healed. And the next nice step is to accept that you have this compulsive addiction. Like, here you are. Can you be okay with that for a beat? Because if you can't be okay with that for a beat, then you're repeating the compulsion. I'm not okay because I have this compulsive addiction to productivity. So now I have to compulsively fix it, and we're in a loop. So the way out of that loop is self-acceptance. This is where I am. And if you can't accept that because you compulsively think something is wrong with you, as many of us, if not all of us, do, then can you at least accept that you can't accept that? This is as far as I can go right now. I'm still flagellating myself. I can't do any better. So I will try to accept where I'm at. And from there, once you can reach that acceptance of where you're at, just the nervous system starts to relax. It's like a physiological thing. It just happens. And from that more relaxed place, help can be accepted, ideas can come in, and you'll start tuning into your intuition, or your intuition will start being, you'll be quiet enough for you to hear your intuition, and you'll be guided out. You'll be guided out of the black hole.
Right. David, what is, so like, I feel like since I've met you, you've identified in several different ways. first as kind of a director, an up and coming film director, and later, as a professional empath, as you are now. But you've always sort of flirted with the idea, or kind of even more centrally, like identified as a writer. And I'm just curious about that, because I feel like it sort of waxes and wanes, and it's like you can be gung-ho about it, and then you can sort of shrink away from it and say, like, this is hell, I'm never doing this again. But I mean, what place does that identification have for you in your life?
The most tender, vulnerable place in my whole being is synced up with David the writer. And in fact, David the director, I'm going to stop talking about myself in third person. When I switched from writer to director, it was not because I had an overwhelming desire to be a director. It was because I could no longer cope with the pain of failing and flailing from my own perspective as a writer. And I still could preserve, at least as a director, the storytelling part. But I never identified my directing work as deeply as I did with my writing. And so there was always this remove. The writer in me died many deaths, and was so deeply, deeply wounded, mortally, like not mortally because I'm alive and he's back, but maybe he died and came back. Like, I want to just, like, this book is partly about that. The amount of pain I suffered trying to get my projects, first writing and then directing, off the ground was unimaginable. Like, it was overwhelming, excruciating pain. And I simply could not cope with that pain as a writer. And so I had to disassociate from the writer. And now that I've healed most of, but not all of that pain, I can step into that truer identity.
Mm-hmm. Huh. I mean, actually, I've been curious to ask you this. For everyone who follows you on Facebook, I feel like sometimes when you say things like, it was too painful for me to be rejected, and so therefore I stopped.
Yes.
I've noticed that those posts can garner some blowback.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, like, and I always find it like fascinating to read the blowback and the controversy under certain posts of yours. And I'm just wondering, like, what is your feeling when you get a response like rejecting some really vulnerable thing that you've put out there on social media?
Well, that one in particular hurt, and now it hurts less and less. So when I would say something like, it's too painful for me to deal with, a common response is something like, what's wrong with you? Toughen up. And that's just, even if it's coming from a good place, actually, no, I take that back. That's never coming from a good place, actually. It's never coming from a good place to tell someone who's deeply hurting to toughen up. It just, sometimes you feel like it's coming from a good place. You believe it's coming from a good place. Where it's actually coming from is an inability on your own part to cope with and look at your own pain. And then you project that into the other person by telling them to toughen up, but you're really telling yourself to toughen up, and you're showing a disregard for their true emotional state. And if you're the one who needs compassion and empathy and attention and attunement and love and care, and you get toughen up, fight harder, it's really painful. And I had to, for whatever reason, my journey was about slowly and over time having the strength not to toughen up and to reject the toughen up line of thinking, and to accept the depth of my need for compassion and care, even if the world wasn't meeting me there.
Right.
And then to learn how to offer it to myself and receive it largely through plant medicine, but then also through caring and loving people along the way.
I mean, it's funny in reading these posts all together in this book. you can see this dynamic like really playing out around your relationship to money, which is so taboo, I feel like, to talk about in the openly naked way that you talk about it. And it's such a tonic to see that. But, you know, I mean, money is kind of the through line of this book, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah. My need for not being able to reconcile, as so many of us struggle, reconcile what felt like the calling of my heart with what it takes to make a living. And so most people have that conflict. Most people have that conflict, but most people have an easier time, though not an easy time, but an easier time than I did, putting aside the calling of their heart to grind out a living. And that is available to most people on this planet. And for deep reasons, it was not available to me. So I could do very little trying to make a living. It just wouldn't work. And that brought me face to face with the money demon and what the hell is going on. And it made me start to question myself, like, is something wrong with me again, that I can't do that? Meanwhile, debt is piling up. And I also want to give a shout out to my parents, who were supportive in this way. I never had my parents. I grew up upper middle class, and I never felt from them that if I needed money, they wouldn't give it to me. And when I came to them for money, they were always generous and thoughtful. Like, I never had any issues there. So it was always available to me, but I didn't want to depend on them. I didn't feel like that was right. And I wanted to figure it out on my own, but it was just like baffling. Like, I have this gift in my heart and I want to offer it, and it's taking the shape of stories, and nobody will pay me for these stories. So I have to go figure out how to make a living in other ways. And then when you go into an ad agency trying to get a job as a producer, and then it's just like, I couldn't do it. You can see me spinning out even as I describe. Well, the one job I had for real, I was hired to direct a series of videos for Advil, and it paid really well, and it was really easy from a directing standpoint. And my boss, he was a decent enough guy. Like, it was a fine situation, and I was plenty smart enough to navigate it. But there were two deep problems with it that I could not overcome. The first was that my boss, as so many bosses do, needed me to tell him things that I didn't believe in order to feel safe. And so he had visions of how to do things that were wrong. And I didn't have the maturity to just allow him to do that and pretend to support him. And so I would not budge an inch, and I would say, this is what's real. And then that didn't work interpersonally. And you know, I used to look at that as, I mean, I said it was a form of immaturity. The immaturity was thinking that I could actually do it. It wasn't that I was immature, therefore I didn't enable him in his wrong thinking. And then the second thing, the deeper incompatibility, was that I could only put so much of my vital life force into selling pain medication. Like, there's just a limit to that. So the idea of spending 10 months figuring out how to market Advil, when in my heart, I'm trying to get people in healthy relationship with their pain and not numb it. Like, these contradictions are just really deep, and most people shove them down and get to work. And I really tried, but then I was just fired, like called into the office and fired. And that was the last time I tried to figure out how to make a living in the regular sense.
Was that painful, or did it feel like a relief?
Both. Both. And I remember after I was fired that day, I went back to my apartment, and I just laid on the couch, and I was in a kind of shock. Part of me felt like a failure. Part of me felt like, I can't even do this. My boss was perfectly nice. Why did I have to say it like that? Or like, why can't I? So all those voices were in my head. But then this deeper thing was emerging. It was just like, it's okay, David. Like, you did the best you can. Like, it hurts. This hurts, but you're going to be okay. Like, just relax. You're here. And I just self-soothed and felt better. Yeah. And then my mother, who's a lawyer, had helped negotiate a deal that left me with more money than by any rights I should have had. And I took some of that money and went to Peru and did lots of plant medicine.
Mhm.
And that was just really, really good for me and really healing. So
What year was that?
this is maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Oh, okay. So wait, was that sort of at the beginning of your relationship to ayahuasca, or what year was it that you took your first ceremony?
2014, I think. 13,
2014.
14.
Okay. And did you sense in that moment like a world of discovery waiting for you?
It was more, yes, partly, but it was more like remembering. It was more like remembering. So uh, you ever have those moments, and we all have those moments where something happens that's simultaneously weird and perfectly logical? Like, oh yeah, this doesn't make any sense, but yes, this makes perfect sense. There have been a few moments in my life like that where I can just deeply tell I'm on the path, even though what I'm doing doesn't quite click in the normal way.
Hmm.
Also, I was so I'm so psychedelics were so easy for me and always have been, that ayahuasca wasn't like, it was like, oh, this is a really smart and interesting psychedelic. It took me a lot more time to really get to know her and learn what she had to teach me, all that she had to teach me.
And it's sort of funny, like a funny aside is that I'm curious who else on this call gets emails and texts from David trying to get them to take their first ayahuasca. Like I can count on once a month at least getting some nudge from David saying like, come do this finally. Because I've written about it, I've attended ceremonies, but I've never taken ayahuasca. And David, I count on you never to stop pushing me in that direction.
It's so funny. I'm sorry, it's not my, but for me, it doesn't occur
Private.
that way at all. It occurs like there's an opportunity and a very loving, open invitation with no push at all.
Right.
Well, it's
Well, David, push me a little harder.
well, some people need a hard push and some people need to be handled very gently. So I like ayahuasca. I adjust to the psychologies of the people I'm talking to.
Well, actually, why don't we open it up to questions, comments? I mean, everyone on this call knows and adores David, I think, and I'm just wanting to hear what everyone is thinking.
I want to know when your book is coming out and when I can get a copy, because I am incredibly excited about this. Incredibly, it makes me so happy for you. And it'd be nice to have a pocket David with me as I travel through the world, and it seems like it's in bite-sized chunks, which is perfect for my attention span.
Barry, it is such a joy to have you here and so good to see you, and thank you. Any moment now, I will send everyone here who registered an email as soon as it comes out on paperback. And if you're a digital person, you can get it right now. But if you want to wait for the paperback like Barry, coming very soon, any minute.
I know, actually, I think paperback is sort of like, that's the essence of this book, because I love what you just said, Bear, about that it's a pocket, David, that you can go through the world with. I found it to be that exactly. Okay, wait, did someone else just go into the chat? How do I, okay. From Elizabeth. Oh, Jim has a question for David. Jim, go ahead.
Not really a question, just I wanted to say how much I enjoyed watching the two of you work together. It was really fun. The questions were great. The answers were always, enlightening and insightful, but I really just, you guys could take this on the road. It was really wonderful. So thank you.
We may very well take it on the road. But Jim, how have you been?
I've been well, thanks. Been working on trying to build a ceremony room, helping David with that. Got the insight to leave a horrible, in that the part about the stress and the anger, it really hit home, because I went through a very, very deep emotional process and left a job. But it was all that fear that we talked about in the beginning of the call, and hearing it explained was really helpful. So I got rid of that, and I have just some other gigs now, smaller, easier to do, but much more flexible, and really feeling that fear rinsing out, and it feels better. It's been going up to Hudson every week or so to try to figure out how to build a ceremony space, and that's fun. So that's me. How you been?
Oh, I've been great. I mean, well, not great, but you know.
Hey, I get it.
Who else? What question has everyone been dying to ask David secretly the whole time they've known him? Because I feel like
That's good.
you may as well ask him now.
But my parents are here, so keep that in mind.
They've heard worse.
I don't know about that.
Okay, Ramona in Brooklyn. Do you have hopes for what will happen for the book?
This is my hope. Like that it's happening. My hopes are very modest. I feel like I'm almost done. If a few hundred people read it, I will truly be happy. I'm working with a woman named Renee who's on the call, and we're trying to do some PR like things, maybe some cool conversations with other authors, maybe some conversations with book clubs and the like. If you have any ideas about that, please connect with me and I will follow the lead. But big picture, I would love for this book to find its way into those people's hands who can most benefit from it. And I think the other thing I'm really doing with this book is reclaiming the writer in me. One thing I'm really proud of is there's not a word in this book that I didn't choose to put in it. And there's nothing that should have been in this book that someone took out of it. And there's something 100% clean and pure about that. And that feels really nourishing. So I think there's another book in me that this book needed to be first.
Oh, I definitely agree that you have more to write. I'm curious, like for such old friends on the call, like Joel, have you been struck by the changes you've seen in David over the years? These are the changes that kind of are the subject of this book. But I mean, isn't it striking how different David is now than he was like 15 years ago?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like, I feel like I've had, the full scope of at least the majority of David's life, and seeing his trajectory kind of play out, and it's wild. I mean, when I think about our time, like maybe around high school, during college, and the person that David is today, it's like in so many ways it's 180 degrees. It's almost like he's retained all of the best aspects of David, and then he's also kind of softened up and gained a kind of a vulnerability and a wisdom. I mean, as you know, just by hearing him speak during this event, he's just so raw and open in a very refreshing way. And I think that probably when he was younger, there was more posturing going on, but I think that happens to many of us when we're younger. What's that?
Totally.
Yeah. And now it's almost like he's shed away that I don't want to call it artifice, but that need to kind of measure up in other people's eyes, and is just very comfortable with himself on a very deep level. And that in many ways is, it attracts people, because that kind of identification, it's easier to feel, because it's just out there,
I think because it signals that you too can discard your own posturing.
That's right. Yeah. And I'm sure just David being so open today, you know, talking about things like money and kind of the way he's perceived and things like that. I mean, these are all very vulnerable, kind of raw things that people are thinking about. It's almost, I'm thinking back about David, like David used to love Howard Stern.
I remember that.
Yeah, we both did when we were growing up, and that kind of just that openness, I'm almost feeling like David is coming into his own just in that way, where it's like he doesn't give a shit about what, you know, how he's perceived by other people. He's just trying to be true to himself and keep it real. So it's a beautiful thing.
David, you're approaching Howard Stern.
No, and Bob Dylan was his other idol. So it's some kind of
Somewhere in between, dark curly hair.
yeah.
Okay, Janine Willis has a question. Janine.
Hey, Casey, thank you.
Hey,
David, hey, congrats, David. It's so exciting to see you living out this beautiful truth of yours. I love always your work, and I've been pondering on this call because you know that I love to just dream big and riff on ideas. I've been pondering if you and I were riffing at the moment on, you know, bigger, broader possibilities beyond a couple of hundred people reading your book. And I guess, as you say, you know, one of your, or perhaps your truth is about helping people getting in touch or helping people get into healthy relationship with their pain, beyond, maybe it's beyond your book, and maybe it's beyond ayahuasca ceremonies and nudging people to do that. What do you envisage is required in the world for the mainstream to really be able to start tapping into this sort of healthy relationship with their pain?
The word that came up, thank you for that question, Janine. The word that came up is a funny one, and I'll share it because I don't want to veer away from Joel's vision of me as authentic, is advertising and media is the way to mainstream a new paradigm that is flickering into being, but is not yet central. So, for instance, if I were running a media company, I don't know how I would not be able to live with myself with what toxic poison I am putting into the culture. And I imagine there are people who are running media companies who feel that way, but have not yet examined it or explored it or felt into the truth of it. And I think we can get to a point in the relative near future where those deeper questions are asked by people with lots of money and lots of power, and the truth starts diffusing. And then that's the ambitious part of me that's still alive. And then there's a less ambitious part of me that maybe is even healthier, that just feels like it's already happening. It's kind of like somebody broke the 4-minute mile, and then all of a sudden everyone broke the 4-minute mile. I think the idea that money, productivity, status, and power are the primary values of our culture, which they are. I think that being enshrined as our cultural dogma, that has been pierced. And the truth has not come through that hole yet. The truth being that each of us has an opportunity to get into healthy relationship with ourselves and each other by owning the full range of our own experience compassionately and engaging to the extent that we can with the full experience of the other. And that through that authentic relating, we will create new groups and communities and cultures and countries and a new world. And that's just happening underground all the time. And it's already, like, in some deep way, I'm not quite yet able to speak on it. Feels like it's already happened. Thanks, Janine.
Thanks, David.
Q has asked a question. Are there any fun stories of working on the book behind the scenes? Or tell us about, maybe Q, I can extrapolate that from that since it was Facebook posts and ask, was there ever any 3 a.m. post that you like launched out there and then you woke up the next morning and you thought, my God, what have I done?
Yes. And I can't remember what they were because they're completely gone. But the you know what comes up, the political stuff. The political stuff tends to get fiery. I wrote a post that's not in this book about how reluctant I was or am to vote for Biden, even though I ultimately will do it. And just the amount of vitriol and rage that came my way was really unpleasant. And so that was kind of funny.
Yeah, and I actually, I was noticing that the way you sort of dealt with that was simply by saying like there was one commenter in particular who was really, really angry at you. And David, talk about how you approach responding to that level of anger, because I thought it was an interesting tactic. You remember?
Yeah. What was, when I get really nasty comments on Facebook, the first thing I do is check to see how I'm responding to them personally. Like, can I handle this? And if I'm just writing from that visceral place of, I'm going to get back at this person, then I just know that I'm contributing to the very thing that just happened to me. So if I am centered, then at my best, and I'm not always at my best, I can really feel into the underlying pain that is being directed at me. So if I say authentically that it might be too nauseating for me to vote for Biden, I can't handle that, and I'm just sharing my authentic truth, and somebody else is responding, you are enabling fascism, you horrible bastard. If I can respond to that with like, I hear you, and I totally get why you see that, and I really understand where that's coming from, and I see the scared little girl in this case who's writing that, then there's a chance for a deeper and more authentic connection between us. And maybe we can bridge the gap in a way that transcends petty politics, but is the real politics that we're all going to need to learn.
Well, any final thoughts that we haven't covered?
I think I want to do some acknowledging, and I want to apologize if I leave you out, because almost everyone here has been an amazing part of my life. And there are a few of you that I don't know well, and I really thank you for joining. But most of you, it's like really moving to look at the tiles and see some really, really dear friends. So there's one person I want to acknowledge. And well, there are a few actually. There are a few people who actually helped with the book concretely. Rachel, I mentioned. Thank you, Rachel, for prodding me. My sister, Rebecca, was very helpful toward the very end of the book and caught a few typos and stomached reading it, which is a whole different experience for my sister, which was really nice. My friend Genevieve, who's also on this call, was great and gave me tons of really good notes, most of which I incorporated. My parents bravely yesterday read those passages in the book that they're included in, and though didn't feel good for them to read them, were very encouraging of the book as a whole and very encouraging of me, and have been very encouraging throughout this whole flowering that I'm doing. And the last person I want to make sure I acknowledge, actually there's two more people. I want to thank my friend Paul, who's on this call, who's in his car, because Paul has been like my writer buddy, kind of like you have been, Casey. And Paul is in touch with the deep writer in me and has been very supportive of my writing. And I've been very supportive of his, and we've been really supportive of each other. So thank you, Paul, for your writing support. And then the last person I'm going to acknowledge for now, with apologies to those of you who deserved acknowledgement and don't get it, is the person to whom this book is dedicated. And a lot of the book came through a play that I did. It wasn't, there's a few passages about the play Empath, a few posts about it, but just working on the play itself forced me to see myself more clearly. And also, after years and years of trying to get projects off the ground, I was so used to rejection that when this man said, here's the money you need to do the play you want, and I support you wholeheartedly, more or less out of the blue, it was so healing to get that incredibly early yes. And so the book is dedicated to David Soley, who believed in me and who is on this call. So thank you, David, for that support, and you earned your acknowledgement. Schwartz, any last things before we wrap it up?
I don't think so.
Okay, I have a last request, which is if people would be willing to just write any thoughts or feelings you have into the chat, like just a few sentences or a few words about what this was like for you, so that I have a memory of your experience, that would make me happy. Even if it's just a word is fine. And nothing is fine too, no pressure. And I really want to thank you, Casey, for being here and doing this and being so enthusiastic about doing this and reading my book so thoughtfully. I really appreciate it. And I think actually what I want to close with is
Sorry, David, could I make one request on your behalf?
Yes.
Which is that if people feel called to write an Amazon book review, they could do that for you.
Oh, you are the best, Rachel. Thank you. So that would be amazing. I want to read, it's a bit of a long one, but I think it's worth it. I want to close on, do I want to close on, okay, you know what? I'm going to close on a short one. There are a few of these posts that are just me being a teacher. Most of them are me being vulnerable and awkward and self-soothing. But some of them I just step into this other mode where I just get really clear and share what I think we need to hear, or at least the people reading my posts need to hear. So this one is very simply called How to Liberate Yourself. It's just tuning into what you're feeling, admitting the feelings into your awareness, and learning over time to express your feelings to yourself and to others. All the reasons why you haven't been able to feel or acknowledge or express your feelings will then appear. Working through these blocks, one at a time, is the work of liberating yourself. And actually, so that's that one. And actually, I'm just gonna, I changed my mind. I'm gonna close with my last paragraph about productivity. And that's truly gonna be the end. We do not have to be productive. We do not have to be productive. We do not have to be productive. We are creatures of infinite beauty, no matter what we do with our time. And if we want to live our purpose, all we have to do is live. That is enough. So with that, thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you, Casey and Q. Thank you, Q, for being behind the scenes. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. And goodbye.
Feel free to unmute yourself and say goodbye.
Yeah.
Hooray!
Bye, everyone. Yay!
Everyone.
Wonderful.
Bye, David.
Bye,
Thank
David.
you.
See you soon.
Congratulations, David.
Congrats, David.
Thank you, Ramona. Thank you, whoever that was.